All right. Good morning. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you so much for making the time to come and join this IBO event. Turnout has been better than expected. We still have a lot of people filing in, but we'll push along with the initial opening procedures, as it were. For this webinar, we do have Q&A available. So if you have a question that you'd like us to answer at the end of the event, feel free to use the Q&A button. It'll be somewhere in one of these sidebars that Zoom makes available, I believe at the bottom of the screen. And you can type in whatever question you have. We have Sarah that's helping us out with the questions, and she'll be kind of compiling them and making sure that we're able to answer them. If for any reason we're not able to get to a question, then we will prepare a written response that will go out to all of the attendees after the fact. As we get started, I want to let Cort say a couple opening words on behalf of Pete, who wasn't quite able to join us. Pete is the director of the IBO. He's been an incredible supporter of this project, and we do really wish that that he could have said a couple opening words. In his absence, Cort will have to fill in his shoes.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. So I talked with Peter McPherson yesterday, our president of the IBO, for almost 6 years now. And the messages he wanted to emphasize we'll also get into here at the beginning. But just as a reminder, the International Blueberry Organization is a voluntary organization supported by membership, this report, and by or support for this report, advertising in this report, as well as our industry events. It operates on a very tight budget and is here to serve the world's blueberry growers. It's a growers organization. Our board is composed of country members, which tend to be the associations or guilds or commissions from the various blueberry producing countries. And broader membership, called associate membership, is available to all private and public organizations who have interest. Membership is very cost effective for an associate member. It's about $1,000. And it's an annual fee. It gives you extensive benefits. We'll get into that in a minute. But the IBO is looking to collaborate with other leading industry organizations, such as the United States High-Bush Blueberry Council, to increase the flow of information and ultimately to promote consumption, promote growth of the market, and promote the general well-being of the industry. So with that, I would say we get started. This report has been going on since, my goodness, 2005, I believe was the first year this came out. And for many, many years, I had the privilege of trying to make this happen every 2 years on my own. And in the last, Colin, 4 or 5 years, we began working together. Yep. Colin has really helped professionalize this report, brought in a great team. And this report is now a labor of love of a really great team that we'll get into in a minute as well. But to give the history, what goes on in the blueberry industry is unique. We work together to have better information to make good decisions. And as much as there's lots of competition in our industry, we have a long history of coming together to work in the interest of the greater good. That spirit in the blueberry industry is what makes this place special, not the IBO, the blueberry industry. And we have an opportunity to help support that through projects such as this. So I'd say if you're new to the industry and you're joining us, there he is. If you're new to the industry and you're joining us, please do consider being a member here, and remember that spirit of what got us here, because it's also what's going to get us where we're going. Peter, it looks like you have been able to join us. Can you hear us, sir?
Yes, I can, Cort, and thank you. Midnight here in Australia, and let me apologise firstly. It's more to do my lack of IT skills, I think, than the system and technology itself. So thank you again, Cort, and I hope everyone on the call is looking forward to what is a well thought out report that really epitomizes where this industry is at today and where it can go to. And I think that's the beauty of the blueberry industry today. When you look at where it sits amongst other categories in the produce industry, not just within the blueberry, just within the berry sector, but in general, I think it's very, very well positioned. I think we've done a lot of good, hard work over the last 2 decades, but there's still a lot more to do. And I think everyone in that blueberry family should be really considering how they can all chip in and assist to make that happen. So I think there's a great blue sky ahead for the blueberry industry, but it's up to us to make sure it happens. So I'll leave it at that, guys, and let you guys get on with the real facts and figures. So thank you all.
Cool. Thank you very much for joining us, Pete. I know it's late over there.
Colin, let's get started. So I'm Cort Brazelton. I'm the chief editor of this report, and have the privilege of being one of the founders of the International Blueberry Organization. I also sit as a facilitator, as a non-voting facilitator on the board of directors of the organization. And Colin, I'm going to let you introduce the team here. Colin has joined me to help professionalize and better organize this report and increase the richness of the data and its utility. I am also co-CEO at Fall Creek, though I am not wearing that hat for this presentation. I'm here to serve the industry today. So Colin, why don't you take over and introduce yourself and the team?
Cool. Thank you very much. I think the total report this year came out to 227 pages, and those pages don't fill themselves. The other people that you see on the screen are the main participants in the creation of this report. Matt is an amazing journalist. I know few other people that are able to coordinate and compile and synthesize the more than 70 interviews that he did with people around the world to create the narrative that is part of this report. As we go through, we'll see a lot of charts. As you open up the report, you'll see a lot more charts. There's a lot of data that is used to create this report. Claudio is the person that's in charge of all the infrastructure and all of the systems that are required to bring all this information together and make it available within the system. Violeta has done an amazing job, especially in the last couple of weeks. She's the one that puts together the actual PDF. So she has to bring all these different nodes that we've created for the report and synthesize it into just one PDF, which will go out at the end of this presentation. Sarah has done an amazing amount of work, especially coordinating with all the different members of the IBO on data collection. That is not an easy task, takes a lot of coordination, a lot of persistence, and I definitely appreciate her help on that. I wear many hats. I kind of pick up the pieces wherever they need to be picked up. And at the end of the day, do a lot of editing and making sure that this final product is of the quality that it is going out to all of you. Cort already touched on this briefly. The IBO is a voluntary organization, and we need your membership. We want to make this as inclusive an organization as possible, and have provided an extensive list of benefits to incentivize your membership of this organization. And we very much appreciate everybody that is currently a member or is considering it and will soon be a member.
I'd add that there's a pending comment here on the careers platform. One of the new benefits we'll be putting out to membership will be access and use of a careers platform. One of the biggest barriers to growing our industry sustainably and successfully is actually talent. And so what we're looking to do with the IBO is to create a focused platform for the blueberry industry for the posting of positions for members who choose to become members, with open access to the broader industry to see those postings and then to engage them. So that's under construction. And the rest of these are existing benefits of memberships. If you have questions, please head to the website, click the Become a Member button, and please join supporting this organization.
We'd also like to extend a very generous thank you to all of the companies that sponsored this year's report. This is the reason the report is free for everybody. Each one of these companies is a huge support to all the work and effort that it takes to tell the story of blueberries from around the world. Again, we wouldn't be able to do what we do without these guys. Thank them. If you know the people that work at these companies, thank them by being their clients. We certainly appreciate everything that they're doing for us.
I believe with that, Colin, we can get started. All right.
Yep.
So I'll take the headline trends before Colin dives into the numbers. So top line figures, if there's one thing to remember from this presentation and to use as a filter while we look at this report, is what's in bold down here. Now, this is not total global average pricing. The best indicator we have for pricing for this research purpose that has a long history going back to 2012, as you see here, even 2010, is global import prices by region. So this does not have domestic point-to-point shipments integrated effectively in it globally, because that data is not available. But it is an indicator of general pricing. So the big picture, since 2018, global volumes have increased by 77%, while average annual pricing saw a decline of only 11%. Now, an 11% decline is not as good as an 11% increase. But if these things were inversely proportional and we were not facing significant market growth, in the world of an economist, a 77% increase in volumes would result in a 77% decrease in pricing potentially. So what we have here is a strong indicator of the general trajectory of the industry. It is becoming more competitive. It is maturing. Pricing is not seeing the same highs, peaks, and valleys that it used to, but remains remarkably consistent on a rolling average. Of course, this does not reflect the realities of the week-to-week pricing in the fresh and processed business, depending on the region and the market. The biggest drivers for these decreases were actually in Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Asia for their products. Those markets are starting to grow from a larger base, and the premiums that are being captured in those markets when the markets were small are balancing out as the markets themselves grow substantially. Program sales increase, and penetration at retail continues to expand year-round, as well as new consumers continue to eat blueberries. Pricing was sustained actually by the Americas, particularly driven by Canadian imports of US and Mexican fruit. Canada is not just a major source of imports into the United States, but is also a major market for the US as well as Mexico. Let's go to the next one, Colin. On the production side of the equation, we see the same thing. Since 2018, we've seen a 77% increase in volume, and we were indeed 10 years ago below the 500,000 metric ton mark. So we have seen in the last 10 years a near quadrupling of global volume from 2012 to 2022. That is an astounding rate of growth on a volume basis, particularly when you look at how much the contribution from the last 4 years has come from Asia Pacific and Europe, Middle East, Africa. Production growth there is directly tied to the growth in consumption in Asia, and particularly the European market. You also see the dip there in the Americas. Let's go back there real quick, Colin. There's a couple contributors to that figure. In 22 and 22 in the Southern Hemisphere, the counter season, Chile saw a down crop. The Southeastern US and other parts of the US industry saw a down crop. And those figures together contributed to a slight drop in total volumes in the Americas. In other trends, margins have indeed been under pressure over the last 2 years, the biggest issue being the rise in overall inputs and labor. Labor during 22 was reported to be up 20 to 30% by most producers who were interviewed for this report. And non-harvest costs, particularly inputs, fertilizers, chemicals, and the like, were reported to have seen increases of 50 to 100% relative to previous pricing. Now, we all lived that supply chain crisis during the late stages of the pandemic. That is balancing out, and costs are beginning to normalize. There's a deep dive into this subject led by one of our guest writers, David Magana from Rabobank, who dove into the production economics and gives a good picture of where that has been and where it is now and where it's going. So thank you to David. So diving in deeper into the more general industry trends, strategies for winning. This year's event that was just held in early July was hosted by Holland. And as we prepared for the event in Poland, we decided to dive into what's been going on in Poland. And what we uncovered without much effort is the special story that Poland has to tell the whole industry, something we can all learn from. Poland has gone over the last 10 years from being a major source, a major exporter for the European market, shipping to the other consuming markets, mainly of Europe, as well as other countries, but has now become a major net importer. If you look here on the graph on the right that shows annual trade flow, imports have almost caught up with total exports. That's because Poland has pursued an aggressive domestic promotion campaign for consumption, sometimes including with importers or source of imports such as Chile. And Poland is now, together with its growing economy, a major source of consumption growth, not just exported fruit. And there's a special section in the report on this story. The subject of field efficiency and productivity took a front seat in this year's report. A quote from one contributor is, "If you haven't got something that's going to give you a big yield, you are wasting your time." Nothing affects unit costs like the top number of the numerator and denominator in a division equation. The higher the yield, the more yield you have to absorb those costs, fixed costs and variable costs in your business. Size detachability of fruit are becoming more important, and the genetics growers select as they seek to increase harvest efficiency. And there's a general trend pushing towards economies of scale and consolidation, driving margin in the business. Lastly, the regions with low costs relative to competition, particularly in labor and transport, continue to expand, namely Mexico, Peru, and Morocco have been major sources of growth. Apologies in advance for the volume of text on this slide, but this is a summary of some of the key feedback on what is driving change in the industry in the last few years. And it's all a subset of the higher benchmarks on quality. In general, now that there is more availability of fruit with improved firmness, flavor, texture, and shelf life, market preferences are starting to change because that product is increasingly available. Those scaled plantings of the new genetics are driving this shift in preference. And the new trend we see, based on contributions in the interviews, thanks to Matt Ogg with all of our contributors, thank you, is the new trend that is the shifting focus now to what we'd call the summer season in the northern and southern hemisphere to high chill. Most of the driver of this shift in quality availability has been driven by the southern high bush, zero and low chill industry, and it's shifting to high chill now. The subject of organics came up a lot. Organics is increasingly not resolving pricing issues or demand. Poor quality organics do not have a strong market. High quality organics do. Quality is the driver. There are increasingly examples being shared of organics being sold conventionally, as organics alone do not create the value proposition consumers are looking for. Organics combined with great quality is a winning strategy, but it starts with quality. So the ultimate conclusion, improving quality appears to be the key to growing demand. I don't think that shocks people a lot, but the fact that we are starting to see real changes and shifts in that direction says a lot about the state of the industry we're in. There were some concerns expressed by contributors about the impact on returns by the continued steady volumes of inferior quality fruit, using their language, should have put that in quotes. But putting in new varieties, if you're going in to a market with better quality that still has ample supply of lower quality fruit, can push down prices, and that is a frustration for some. So other industry trends. The subject of machine harvesting fresh has become a very big topic in our industry. There's a lot of research going on in this arena among public and private institutions and companies. The views on the practice are divided depending on who you talk to today. Where it is today is obviously not where we want it to be, but there are mixed reviews. So the new technology on the harvester side, together with the right varietals and the field design side of the equation, they're not conclusive and they're not scaled. There are some interesting trends out there, some interesting opportunities starting to show themselves, but they haven't come to a real commercial scale yet. That is a big opportunity. Most of the machine harvested fruit today is reported as a detriment to the market. A good friend of mine who's a grower in Oregon, was standing with him in a field last year, and I asked him which varieties are performing best in his machine harvest work. And he said, well, every variety is a machine harvest variety when you don't have enough labor. So many times machine harvest for fresh is happening out of need. Success is low rejections versus high consumer uptake. And there's a substantial opportunity to continue improving on the technology, not just to lower the cost, but to improve the quality. So there's a lot of work to do in this arena, but that subject is not going away. ESG has become a big word that can elicit different feelings depending on the audience around the world, but there is a lot of noise around in the environment, social and governance issues, not just in our industry, but the food supply chain in general in agriculture and horticulture. Tamara Marueta Goena has, from the IFPA, the International Fresh Produce Association, has provided a contribution to this report, diving into some of the sustainability insights that can help inform people on what this means, because ESG can be a slippery subject. It can be hard to get a handle on. The three most prominent subjects that have stood out are packaging, particularly plastics. Recyclable plastics still take a lot of energy and are not fully reusable in many cases. And most of our packaging is certainly not biodegradable. The general subject of climate change, carbon emissions and greenhouse gases, and regenerative agriculture are garnering a lot of attention. There are some success stories to tell in blueberries. The fact is blueberries do use less water than many other high-value crops. That can vary enormously by variety and region, but it is an area for research. There's also strong evidence based on some research at Oregon State University that blueberry farms, at least high-chill blueberry farms, are a major carbon sink, which may actually create benefits for producers on the carbon credit side in the future. Blueberry development and industry development does support large labor forces and also contributes to the development of schools, health clinics, and vocational training, particularly in the developing world, which is a major positive trend and a good story for our industry. And lastly, but not least, the strong health narrative of blueberries for consumers, blueberries as a healthy alternative to some of the other unhealthy choices people around the world are faced with, is a major positive trend for our crop. So if you want to dive into that more and figure out what that means for your business, that section of the report is a good place to start. On the health research update side, all of this health research today is funded and supported by the Health Research Committee of the United States Highbush Blueberry Council. Special thanks to Dr. Leslie Wada, who is the in-house expert and a longtime researcher and PhD researcher on health, who has helped amalgamate that update. If you'd like an insight into what's going on in blueberry health research, not just what the conclusions are today, but new research based on indicators on where we should focus, it's held in that report. So some standout things. We've heard for many years about the brain health and impact on cognitive decline in older adults and the benefits in blueberries. That is starting to show in more clinical studies, not just animal studies. Cardiovascular health has risen up as a major subject and an argument for blueberry consumption. This should say reduced insulin resistance. So that insulin resistance is oftentimes an indicator of prediabetes, type 2 diabetes in particular, and improved cholesterol, increased HDL and lower LDL cholesterol. Gut health, general bioactivity in flora and fauna in the gut is showing a strong correlation with blueberry consumption. And this one's important in a series of epidemiological studies on very large populations, particularly led by Dr. Eric Rim, which has a group of 180,000 people that it's been following for almost 40 years, who record every day, everything they eat, everything they do, as to support this study. And after cutting through all the noise, consumption of blueberries as a single factor are correlated, so not causal, correlated with a 5% reduction in total overall risk of mortality. That is a pretty big conclusion, and 5% is a big number in a population of 180,000 people. So all very positive trends. There are ever-growing reasons to eat blueberries. This health research supported by the USHBC, which is funded by assessments from growers, not just in the United States, but all the exporting countries that ship fruit into the United States that pay assessments. This is a major, major contribution from the Highbush Blueberry Council to the global industry. And there's a growing interest in increasing collaboration between IBO, other industry associations, and USHBC, both to disseminate this information and look to increase the amount of research happening abroad. The new funding that has been approved for 2023, there's been a lot of focus on the elderly. Now there's going to be increased focus on the impact on learning and memory in school-age children with blueberry consumption, as well as blood flow, nutrient delivery to muscles, as well as muscle recovery, and then an exploratory study that will investigate blueberry consumption in hearing disorders, which is a new one for me. Blueberries do have a strong anti-inflammatory effect. And if you were to ask my wife, she would say anything that improves my hearing would be very welcome since I'm half deaf. So let's jump to the next slide, Colin. All right. I'm going to pass the baton to Colin now to dive into the numbers. Thank you. I'll see you on the conclusions.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Cort. So starting off with some of the headline numbers that we're able to collect for this report, the total number of hectares planted came out to an estimate of 248,548 hectares. That continues to be led by the Americas, followed by Asia Pacific and the Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Of those, about 16% of the hectares are not yet in production. This figure is actually down from 19% in 2021, and this can be the reason that this figure is falling is mostly due to two factors that we're able to observe. On one hand, there was a big surge in high-chill bushes that were planted around 3-4 years ago that are coming online. And the larger percentage of the hectares planted are low-chill varieties that come to commercial production faster. As the low-chill varieties take a larger percentage of the market, that means that we are able to get hectares that are actually in production spun up faster, and that's why they're taking a larger percentage of the market share per se. Of the hectares in production, the industry has been able to bring to market, or at least produce, 1,860,000 metric tons. So that's 1.8 US billion kilos. This is a very large number. We kind of looked at this chart earlier on when Cort started presenting. So we'll push on to other information. We can see that there's definitely been a larger trend in growth from fresh production as opposed to processed. The largest contributor to processed blueberries in the market is the US and Canada, which, as Cort mentioned before, have seen a decrease in their production for various mostly weather-related factors in the last season. And we're seeing that reflected in the production figures as well. This has also contributed to kind of an interesting nugget of information that we're able to capture from the overlook of global hectares and production. So for the first time ever, the Americas, which includes all of Latin America, so Chile, Peru, Argentina, Colombia, some of the more nascent producing regions, Mexico and the US, has fallen below 50% of global production. This not only reflects some of the issues with the actual production and the weather-related issues in the last season, but also a lot of the growth that's coming out of Asia Pacific and EMEA. And we expect this trend to continue going forward. So taking all of these statistics into account, one distinguishing factor from this report that we haven't observed, at least since I've been a part of this report, is we saw global yields fall for the first time since 2016. This is important for a lot of reasons. This impacts the possible trajectory. If you've never seen the yields fall before, then it's hard to envision that happening, but now it has. The average global yield came out to 8,876 kilos per hectare. That's down from 9,293 kilos in 2021. And this kind of plays into an important calculation that we make throughout the report. We have this calculation made available through every region, including the global summaries. We can see that the industry is still planting. We're still growing the volume of land that is used to produce blueberries at a global scale. The fact that yields came down means that 96.3 million kilos were taken out of the market that we otherwise might have expected, should yields have at least maintained even the previous year. The fact that hectares are still growing means that the capacity to produce is not diminishing. So should we have a year where the weather plays to our favor, we could see our production numbers bounce back rather quickly. Not sure if this year will be that case. Again, last year, most of the issues in production were in North America. And this year, the Americas, from Peru to Chile, all the way up the Pacific Northwest, are dealing with the effects of El Nino. We have yet to see what exactly the result of that will be. But I think everybody is, generally speaking, braced. Peru's already throwing flags up that their production has been impacted. And everybody's kind of braced to see what the result of that will be. So part of the report, we also create a projection that looks 4 years out into the future. Based on trends, this is a significant difference from last year's forecast. Again, some of the biggest implication for projecting these numbers forward has been the unexpected decrease in yields. When you're building regression, if you've never seen yields fall before, you don't expect yields to fall. And our previous forecast reflected that. This new version takes into account the possibility of that decrease going forward. And some of these numbers have been adjusted as a consequence. But this gives you a rough idea based on historic trends of where the industry could go moving forward. As a part of this report, we tracked we tracked 73 countries, specifically looking at the production numbers. In this map, we can see kind of which ones are some of the largest producers, and you kind of get an idea of where the center of gravity for global production might be. But we can also see the breakdown in the top 10. The country with the most hectares planted is China, which comes with a lot of caveats. Most of these hectares are not competing necessarily with shelf space in the supermarkets. A lot of this is basically used for production of a liquor, Baijiu, I believe it's called. I've never actually tried it. Cort says it's delicious, sarcastically. And another notable figure that we have from this year is Chile actually overtook Peru to be the third largest planter of blueberries in the world. When we narrow this down to production, this is the combined production of processed and fresh cultivated or high bush. Peru overtook the US on account of an incredible year of growth that Peru has had, and also the decreased production that we mentioned before from the US. China maintains its place as the largest producer. Again, a lot of production for Baijiu. And then the rest of the world is kind of falling in line where we're used to seeing it, at least where we've seen it in the past. When we look at fresh production, so not processed, Peru leads the pack, followed by China and the United States. Poland this year, which had another year of incredible growth, overtook Spain for the first time, which saw a slight decrease on their production. Looking at only processed, China leads the pack here. Again, not necessarily competing for shelf space or cooler space, as the case may be. But so there's caveats that go with that figure. Poland actually lost its position as the 9th largest producer of process. And I think that's partly reflecting the increased consumption within their market, where producers are able to get a better value for fresh, and they're moving product to that category where it's possible. Also reflecting a lot of the infrastructure that Poland has invested in, especially refrigeration, to get blueberries out into the countryside. When we look at the top 10 exports by country, again, this is an export-oriented publication, so exports take precedence. Peru is the largest exporter in the world, more than doubling the next largest exporter. The next largest exporter isn't necessarily an exporter. The Netherlands is more of a re-exporter. They're also one of the largest importers in the world. They're kind of one of the gates into the European market. The Port of Rotterdam is one of the busiest ports in the world. And our statistics reflect that as well. Chile lost its place as second largest producer in the world this year, where we're seeing large amounts of growth from South Africa and Poland, where the United States, which had a decreased production this year, went down. And Hong Kong, which is kind of China's version of the Netherlands, Hong Kong's also a big re-exporter, saw a decrease, not necessarily because Chinese imports decreased, but there's more fruit, especially after the pandemic, that is going directly to China and is not crossing through Hong Kong. When we look at the top 10 fresh imports, United States continues to be the largest importer in the world, almost doubling the size of the Netherlands, which again is a re-exporter. Germany increased, overtaking the United Kingdom. The fact that the United Kingdom decreased has kind of been an ongoing trend, especially with the effects of the increase in value that the United Kingdom is willing to pay for imported blueberries. And this is kind of a bit of a hangover from Brexit. It's something we're going to keep on tracking. They traditionally had a very large role within the European market. It was kind of between them and Germany. As that decreased, it'll definitely change the market landscape. And China continues to grow, increasing on Spain, which is also a bit of a re-exporter. Although they do have a lot of production, Spain also moves a lot of Morocco's volume. Continuing on to wild production. Wild production has grown this year, mostly thanks to increased production from Canada. There's a story here, especially considering the amount of crown land that has been assigned to the production of wild blueberries. And this is something that we're expected to see. Canada has been the largest producer of wild in the world, and looks to continue to be the largest producer of wild in the world. And I think one of our last charts is looking at total global production, which surpassed the 2 million metric tons for the first time. And that's an easy number to kind of wrap around your head and remember and quote out if need be. But the total production of blueberries has now surpassed 2 million metric tons. This is a very large milestone. And we can see that the trend has leveled off compared to previous years, but it's still a notable statistic. I think another interesting trend that we see from this chart is the bifurcation of fresh and processed, especially that happened around 2016. This more or less coincides with the onboarding of low bush blueberries, especially the ramp up of Peru and Mexico, a lot of Spain and Morocco, even a lot of what's happening in China and Yunnan. That has all contributed to this massive expanse of fresh blueberries as opposed to processed, which is still increasing. And that's a lot of thanks to contribution to the Pacific Northwest. And Chile is also ramping up its production of processed. But fresh continues to fetch better prices in the market. And we're seeing that reflected in the production mix at a global scale. So with conclusions and recommendations, I'll let Cort unmute himself and wrap up the presentation for us.
Thank you, Colin. All right, so conclusions and recommendations. You've already heard this trend, but we want to emphasize it one more time because it is really a significant indicator of where we've been and where we seem to be going as an industry. So since 2018, over the last 5 years, from 18 to 22, volume went up 77% globally, with average pricing down 11%. And Colin, there are questions in the Q&A there we may want to address. I assume that's Comtrade data that informs those import prices, reflecting strong sustained growth in the market. Where's the growth coming from? While yields were down for many zero and low chill plantings are maturing. So average yields continue to remain remarkably high relative to historical figures. It's important to note that for 2023, this year, we will have more distorted data. As many of you have seen the reports in from Peru, this is a significantly disrupted year in some parts of the Pacific Rim, particularly in Peru at this juncture. Time will tell how this will play out over the next 12 plus months in North America as well. Margins are under pressure, driven primarily by increased cost, as well as inflation, putting pressure on returns in nominal and real economic terms. The other big trend we'd like to call out is the rapid growth of what used to be called counter-seasonal supply, what in the Northern Hemisphere would be September through November and late February, March into late April, early May. The counter season has become the new peak, is a common slang term you hear in the industry today, driven by this massive growth in new and existing sources of supply in zero and low chill blueberry genetics. That trend is now feeding into this new focus on the summer period for the Northern Hemisphere and the summer period in Chile, when there's a gap in the ability of Peru in particular to deliver the quality desired. So fresh availability year round is much more consistent, which is driving this focus to quality as well as value creation. So other comments and summaries from the input we received from our contributors: the most competitive companies that are sustaining cash flow and growth are able to consistently increase their yields and are staying ahead of the quality wave. I would also add that companies who have the benefit of a large amount of in-house production, but also participate on the packing or the packing and selling side, have more points of margin and are realizing a larger portion of the total margin share available in the industry. The industry's growth, its professionalization and maturation continues. That trend is present throughout this presentation, as well as the report. And ESG, environmental, social, and governance issues, are becoming of increasing importance in the industry. Other reflections on supply and the market trends. In the fresh market dynamics, if we were to say one thing, it is quality is now king. Those who have quality have markets. Those who don't have a strategy to have better quality will need one. We're expanding our base of consumers. Since this report began, most of the years over the last more than, almost 17, 18 years, the message has been our growth is driven by existing consumers consuming more blueberries. In the last 6, 7 years, that has changed. Now those existing consumers are indeed consuming ever more blueberries, but we are capturing new consumers in major markets like the US and Canada that have a long history of blueberry consumption, but a massive increase in our consumer base, particularly in Europe and Asia, led by China and Western and Northern Europe, as well as places like Spain and Poland that are addressed in this report. That is changing the demand dynamics of our industry. On the processed market side, it's important to call out that there are indeed some challenges. That as a total percentage of crop, the fruit going to process went down last year. That is likely to happen again as I sit here today in the Pacific Northwest. We're facing a substantially down crop, very strange year in the Pacific Northwest. And the shortage of fruit into the processed and freezer market is not reflected in the pricing. This is a market that is not making decisions based on timely data. So this limited line of sight to true volumes, movement in inventories, and pricing is putting the industry under what I would argue to be unnecessary duress. Now, that is an editorial comment, but that is an opinion held by many. So, advice to growers looking to the horizon. I was asked to share this, and it always makes me nervous. So if this advice seems way too general, please forgive me for keeping it general, but I'm trying to keep it practical and applicable for everyone. But if I was giving advice to a grower today, looking to the horizon, I would encourage them to have answers to these questions. So in an industry facing increased competitive forces, who is my true competition? Who am I competing with? What are their strengths? And what are mine? And of the strengths that are mine, how can I lean into those strengths? How can I invest in those strengths to make my business more competitive? Now, correcting weaknesses, if that's possible, is always a good strategy, but starting with strengths, because every growing region has them. Increased quality expectations. Looking at your business, what are the next steps to improve the firmness, shelf life, size, and flavor of my fruit to the consumer? How can we improve our quality? Is it post-harvest? Is it new varieties? Is it increasing the new variety trialing a grower is doing to get to know what's out there from all the different programs that are putting out new genetics? What is your path to finding that better quality? Or is it keeping your fruit closer to home as well as the local for local deal grows? Countering increased harvest costs. What is my best path to reduce my total unit harvest cost while maintaining or improving quality? Today, many of the tools used to reduce harvest costs, particularly mechanization, are not resulting in better quality and longer shelf life of our product. So with that, we want to say thank you again to the sponsors of this report. This is why this report is now free to the industry and all who are interested. One of the most important objectives of the IBO is to live up to our slogan that a more informed industry is a healthier, more sustainable industry. So as Colin stated earlier, please be a patron of these organizations. There are companies as well as country organizations here. Please support them. And if you encounter them in the world, please say thank you for your support. This report would not be possible without their sponsorship. So lastly, Colin, I believe we have a little direction on how to download this report, which after this seminar will be available to all. You will notice that we are asking, and I'll say this to save you the pain, Colin, you will notice we are asking for your email. We are not going to send you thousands of emails. This email address that you share with us is for the purpose of increasing our polling. We are going to be reaching out to all of you and everyone in the industry as this report grows and improves to get your feedback on critical issues so we can have opinions in this report that reflect the trends of the industry. So that is our main driver. for having your email address. We do not want to harass you with lots of emails. We know we all get too many emails already. Thank you to the team, and Colin, I'll let you wrap it up with those thank yous.
All right. Yeah, no, thank you very much to all the contributors, to all of the member countries that passed along their data to form the statistics that we just viewed. And definitely everybody that contributed to creating this monolith of a presentation. Again, it's 227 pages that don't fill themselves. It's been an incredible labor of love, blood, sweat, and tears, as it were, to create this. And I personally very much appreciate everybody that participated in that effort. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I'm going to go ahead and assume that's Cort's heart as well. Finally,
right. Colin, I think before we go to Q&A, let's see if our president, if Mr. McPherson, who is now at 1 a.m. his time, has any comments for the group before we go to Q&A.
Well, gentlemen, and to Colin and Cort and your teams, as outlined earlier in the session, a great job. I mean, when we first started this some time ago, and yesterday I was only cleaning out my cupboards as I start my journey towards retirement, and I come across a couple of old documents where the one and only Dave Brazelton was actually giving this report and overview back in the day. So the reflection of what has happened and how this industry has grown is second to none. And without the data that you guys have been making available, the decision making that comes from that, from across the whole industry, not just from a growing and a breeding side, but all those other corporate services and providers, supply chains, etc., rely on this report now to make big equity investment financial decisions to take the industry forward. So all I can say is that I think we're in a very, very good space. But again, it's up to us as the Blueberry community and family to make sure that we're still in a good space in the future. We can't change the past, but we can certainly have a say in the future. So it's up to all of us to get behind what we think is, you know, best practice. And I think that word's used too lightly these days, and build on all the strengths that we have as an industry, and our product is second to none. So again, a big thank you to you guys and your teams for the report. And let's, as an industry, get behind the recommendations that are here. Let's also be as open and transparent as we can in providing the information to the team going forward, because it is a win-win situation for all. So a big thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Peter. So we do have questions in here. Colin, I'm going to throw this first one at you. This is from our friend Justin Mudge in South Africa. He's asking about the export figures. If those are accurately recorded, how accurate are the actual production figures, which are typically unvalidated by functional processes? I'll let you take that one, and I'll add some color if we feel we need it, because this is not an exact science at all times.
It is not. Most of the production figures that we have published, especially for the major producing regions, are volunteered by all the regional grower associations. So that would be in South Africa, for example, Berries South Africa. In Mexico, we have Anaberry's contribution. In the US, it's a mix between the USDA and what the USHBC makes available. Chile, Peru, Australia, so on and so forth. All the local producer organizations volunteer their information to us, and that's what we recollect. We do some sanity checks on that, especially using the import and export information. In South America, that's a really valuable tool to be able to validate this, these statistics, where most of the production is specifically created for export. Mexico is much the same case. Where you have markets like the US, we do the best we can. We might not necessarily have that third-party objective perspective to be able to validate the data. And there you start looking, you try to validate it against, for one case, yields. So you look at the hectares in production and you divide out the production numbers. And if the yields more or less fall in line with what you're expecting, then that's the data point that we're going to publish. Where none of these other factors line up, we try to present the most likely scenario based on all the information and commentary that we've received going forward. So that's how we collect the data. That's how we validate it in a very simplified manner, or explaining it. We do know that it's not perfect, but we do try to present the best possible information and the most in an objective fashion that we can.
The only other thing I'd add, Justin, is the methodology we use, while it continues to improve, is based on the same process over many years. So because it's wrong every year, the good news is we are consistently using the same wrong methodology to get this information. It is true that there are many countries that we report on in this report that do not have an industry organization, that do not have official data, and we are highly reliant on local participants in that industry to give their perspective. When there's a lot of space between them, we try to weigh those perspectives between each other. Sorry for the noise, everyone. But the focus there is to get the best information possible based on people close to the ground when we do not have official figures. We have another one from Bob Morris. Would this deck be sent out to attendees? I think we'll bring that question back to the exec committee of the IBO. Generally, we don't send the deck out everywhere. It usually leaks out at some point anyway. But the report is indeed free. And I think we'll figure out. I don't think we have an answer on that deck. We should. Apologies. The next one, Colin, I'll take this one. How high is production in Peru, and how is it going to affect Mexico production? So I would say let's look at recent history, look at today, and look to the future. Over the last 10 years, in the early part of the last 10 years, up to about 4 years ago, Mexico was able to do, particularly central Mexico, was able to prune and manage nutrition on some genotypes, off-cycle primocanes, to produce a fall cycle. That fall cycle, producing sometimes as early as late September, October, November, early December, was mainly primocane fruit and offered quite good pricing because the fall period was quite short. As Peru came into its own, many Mexican growers moved away from producing in that window and turned their focus to winter and early spring in central Mexico. This year will be a false flag. It is highly likely that the market will be very short compared to previous years because of the substantial drop in anticipated production from Peru due to the El Nino weather event. That may indicate to some producers in Mexico that there is an opportunity for off-cycle production again in the fall. Assuming that to be the case would probably be misinformed. So if you do have fall fruit coming in this year, this is a good year to have it because of how short Peru is and how late that information arrived to the industry from Peru. In the meantime, long-term, Peru has a strong position in that September through December window, and it is unlikely to go away anytime soon. So Mexico's natural most competitive window, when it is generally easier to achieve higher yields as well as great quality, is really for central Mexico, late November all the way into early April, and for Baja and the like, late winter and early spring. So that's the best answer I can offer today. This year is going to be an interesting year in the market. Right now, the information has not flowed very effectively, but it's starting to get out that Peru is indeed having a challenging year, which is unfortunate for Peru and unfortunate for product availability. We have another one from Ahmed Kablan. What are the possible ways to deal with our sustainability issues with our greenhouse gas emissions? I was looking at some figures on greenhouse gas emissions by maritime shipment versus trucks. And it is interesting how much lower per kilometer, per kilo, the greenhouse gas emissions are in maritime shipments relative to trucks, but those are long trips. The easy answer, Ahmed, is to continue to focus on developing closer, fresher product that also reduces food waste. I am not an expert in maritime shipping. I think we all would love to see growth of maritime shipments that are less greenhouse gas intensive, bulk shipping of product to increase efficiency and use of containers is a trend that we see that does help. In many ways, I think our biggest opportunity for greenhouse gas emissions is actually what I mentioned earlier, which is around our fields becoming a carbon sink for greenhouse gases, particularly carbon and methane. So there's a lot of research coming out of Oregon State there. Would be curious to see if that can be replicated in lower and zero chill growing areas. There tends to be a lot of grass in the rows in the Pacific Northwest where that research was done. So I know that's not a great answer, but I don't feel scientifically qualified to give you a perfect one, but you are asking the right question.
I think there's also some research that can be done, especially looking at the import and export data that we manage. We are able to see the cross-border transactions in Europe. That gives us a good visibility. I mean, that's almost like looking at cross-state transactions in the US. So that gives us a lot of visibility of what route the fruit is traveling through. And we might be able to estimate what the actual impact, especially as far as carbon emissions, might be on the transport of those goods, considering that they always go by truck. I also don't know the reason, but I am curious to know, like, is a blueberry that travels from Peru by boat that spends a couple weeks on the water uses more carbon than a truck that goes from Mexico all the way to New York? I don't know the answer to that. I think that would be a very interesting question to ask, and that may be an update to this report going forward, especially if USAID, which is who Ahmed works for, is willing to contribute to that.
Thank you. Ricardo Marquez, good question. Other country and regions besides North America, Europe, and China that can grow their blueberry consumption. You have an example of lists there: India, Mexico, Japan. There's a large number of countries now that are centers of consumption that weren't even on the radar 5 and 10 years ago. So the Middle East is a major center of growth. India is increasing its imports as well as its domestic supply. We're seeing it all around the world. Where this will go is anyone's guess, but it's looking increasingly likely that our consumption base will become increasingly global. I was sitting at and some of you have already heard this, so apologies if you have. 15 years ago, I was sitting in a meeting at in Fruit Logistica in Berlin with a leader from the Egyptian fruit industry. And we're talking about planting blueberries and should we grow them in Egypt. And I asked, where will you ship them? Will you ship them to Germany or Northern Europe or the UK? He said, no, we're going to ship them to Cairo. We're going to sell them here, and we're going to ship them to other parts of the Middle East because no one has a monopoly on wanting to eat healthy. So the trend of everybody wanting to eat healthy, as incomes increase, people being able to afford to do so, which blueberries often show up at the top of the list, is a positive trend for our industry. Eric Venturini asking, barring weather challenges, do you expect the trend in increased machine harvest to lead to greater shunting of fruit to process, or to see that continue? Machine harvesting is set to increase in areas that are facing serious labor issues, particularly in North America and Canada, as well as Europe. We should expect more fruit coming off those lines, even if they're machine harvesting for fresh, to get moved over to processed. The big concern today is the impact it'll also have on fresh quality, but the trend is the trend. Right now, we're not seeing near the diversion to processed as many people would otherwise expect. Some of that is because of crop disruptions, and some of that is because of the inconsistency in process pricing. But as the market becomes more selective, regardless of where the fruit comes, I think we should anticipate more fruit going to processed if it doesn't meet the growing quality expectations of the fresh market. Once the retail side of the equation has options and has sources of supply that they find most reliable for repeat sales, reduce shrink, we are likely to see some fruit find fewer homes in the fresh market. And if it stays in the ground, it is more likely to go processed. Great time to develop new packaged good products using blueberries.
I think we're going to do, we're a bit over time. We're going to do 2 more questions quickly. There's one from John Pandel, who a vocal presence within the industry, who just asked quickly about the pricing. The pricing that we mentioned in this presentation, the closest equivalent is CIF, so cost including freight. These are import prices across the world, and that's an easy question to answer, so I thought I'd get out of the way. And then, Cort, you want to take one more, and then we proceed to actually launching this thing so everybody can
Sure.
dig in with their own teeth.
All right, I'll try to combine Nick and Ian's questions together if I can. So the reductions in U.S. production, if so, what the trend that's already established in this report, you can dive into the more granular data on regional production within the countries and regions that we've reported on. There has been a gradual shift to increased volumes in the Western states and Canada, in the US and Canada, and some decreases on a rolling average in Michigan and the Eastern Seaboard. Now, that being said, there's a lot of replanting going on in places like Michigan, also in Georgia, and I think we should anticipate more consistent and sustained production as growers turn to focus on higher input farming. But there is a lot of land and water in the Pacific Northwest, less so in California. There's land, less water. But right now, if there's going to be a shift, I don't think it would be a total reduction on average. A year like this where the Northwest is down, I think we may see lower volumes. But on average, I don't see the volumes going down. I see where it comes from shifting potentially. And that plays into Ian's question as well. Niche growing opportunities that seem to be showing up is in the developed markets. So if you're a grower in the US or Canada or parts of China or in Europe, the opportunity to be close to market, there is a growing preference for local. Local is becoming a trend, particularly if that local quality is good or good enough. There's a strong preference by consumers for local fruit in the developed world. And that is, I would not even call that a niche, I'd call it a macro niche. The other one is indeed, there are a lot of new consumption markets looking for good quality fruit, and getting close to those markets and producing for them is a trend we see happening around the world as well. I know there's many more. I would say market segmentation and product segmentation is a growing opportunity. We're seeing some of that happening in the US as well as Europe for a longer period of time, where there is segmentation by quality, branding concepts, and differentiation at retail that calls out when a product is uniquely better. And that is a growing segment in the market. There are different ways that is executed on in different markets. So with that, Colin, as you said, why don't we launch this report and show that you have the website where people can go to download this and dive in?
All right, so yeah.
There it is.
Without further ado, this link is now live. You've been sent it in your chat. You can click on that. You can download this full report right now. Thank you very much for joining us. Again, this presentation had a much better turnout than initially it was expected. This is the first year we've ever done this. And so thank you all very much for participating. Thank you very much for your questions. I know we weren't able to address all of them. Anything that we missed, we'll follow up as well as with a written response to the questions that we've answered so far. And you will all receive that within the week. We'll leave this up for a while. If anybody still has questions, by all means, feel free to drop it in the Q&A. And we'll compile these at the end of once everything's been shut down, and send those out to everybody else.
Thank you, everyone. For those in season, good luck with the rest of your season. For those who have a season coming, good luck with your season. Be well, eat your blueberries, and go Blueberries. We'll see you later.
Have a good day, night, evening, morning.